Tak dobré odpoledne, byť je vás tu stále málo, čímž vás tak jemně vyzývám opět, abyste se přesunuli sem už do diskuzní části, protože budeme pokračovat v dalším programu. Ještě než uvedu následující panel, dobrý den, tak bych ráda upozornila taky na vedlejší panel, který probíhá ve vedlejší zasedací místnosti. Cesta je tamhle z mého pohledu vlevo, jenom rovně, a tam probíhá panel Ženy v médiích. A taky bych chtěla upozornit, kape nám tady od někud voda, no nevadí, taky bych chtěla upozornit, že tamhle u registračního stolu si můžete vyzvednout zařízení na tlumočení. Bylo mi řečeno, že jich je tam nějak podezřele hodně, takže pokud někdo celou dobu nerozumí, tak by to bylo mrzuté. Takže doufám, že všichni, kdo potřebují to zařízení, tak si ho vyzvedli. Pokud ho ještě nemáte, tak je k dispozici tamhle u toho stolu. A teď už bych ráda uvedla následující panel, ve kterém budeme tak trochu cestovat po Evropě, protože budeme sbírat inspiraci z Estonska, Kypru, Slovinska a dozvíme se taky více o novinkách v Bruselu ze strany Evropské komise. Budeme odpovídat na otázky, jako je, čím se v přístupu k genderové rovnosti můžeme právě od ostatních evropských zemí inspirovat, jak se v zahraničí daří získávat společenskou a politickou podporu pro tyto zásadní změny, nebo na to, jak úspěšná byla předchozí Evropská komise v naplňování priorit a co lze očekávat od komise v novém složení. Na to se panel pokusí odpovědět a předtím, než představím naše vystupující, tak bych opět ráda upozornila, že to bude samozřejmě logicky vzhledem k mezinárodním hostkám a hostům panel v angličtině. A bude ho moderovat vedoucí oddělení sekretariátu Rady vlády pro rovnost žen a mužů Monika Šamová. Dobré odpoledne, je to vaše. Pardon, ještě jsem zapomněla, ano, vystupující. Docela důležitá věc, ano. Takže Josie Christodoulou, kyperská zmocněnkyně pro genderovou rovnost. Dobré odpoledne. Monika Ladmanová, vedoucí zastoupení Evropské komise v České republice. Helena Valas, vrchní ředitelka sekce pro rovné příležitosti na slovinském Ministerstvu práce, rodiny, sociálních věcí a rovných příležitostí. Dobré odpoledne. A Veske, estonský zmocněnec pro genderovou rovnost a rovné zacházení. Dobré odpoledne. Tak teď už je to vaše, paní Šamová.
Thank you, Linda, for giving me the floor. Hello, everyone. My name is Monika Šamová, and I work for the Gender Equality Department, so I'm one of the organizers, and it's always nice to see so many familiar and non-familiar faces. So this panel will be special, not only because it's in English, but also because it's very international. As Linda mentioned, we'll be traveling through Europe, from Estonia to Slovenia to Cyprus, but also we have a representative, the head of European Commission's delegation in Czechia here, reflecting the successes, but also future challenges of the Europe in general. This will be not only diverse by the different countries we'll cover, but also by the topics. So we will cover gender-based violence, gender balanced decision-making, but also anti-discrimination as such. And the goal of this is to look for best practices from other countries, which will inspire us as a country. So I'm not going to take much more time. Just I want to mention that at the end, there will be 10 minutes approximately for you to have questions. So there will be a chance for this. And now I will give first question to all my panelists, which is of general nature. How would you assess current state of gender equality in your countries? What do you think are the biggest obstacles, but also priorities in your countries respectively? And to Monika, maybe how would you assess the current state of the gender equality across the EU as a whole? What are the current challenges for the new commission and maybe successes of the previous one? Big questions. Looking forward to hear your answers.
Does it work? Okay. I thought we're going to go in order, but okay, I'll start first. So I'm from Slovenia. I will maybe assess the position of Slovenia through indexes. And then since we live in a bubble world lately, I was living in Slovenian bubble, and now today I'm Czechia, and it was the first time in my life that I was observing your indexes as well, and I realized that there is a huge world of difference. So, according to EGE, that's a European index, Slovenia ranks 12, and it ranked the same last year, and it's just below the average of European Union, we managed to keep the same position as the ranking before. So we are doing quite well according to the index. Specifically, we are well in the educational sector, on knowledge, then power, of course, because we had elections and the results were in favor for women. And we slightly lost in the domain of time, but also in the domain of economics, because our pay gap has went up. And then I was observing Czechia, and you're on the 26th position out of 27 states. So I didn't know that. I really am, honestly, I was maybe shocked. And then we have World Economic Forum ranking. Maybe I don't agree with the forum per se, but the ranking is good, and it has 4 indexes. One is economic, the other one is educational, third is health and survival, and fourth is political empowerment. Here, Slovenia, and the index is very up-to-date, so this one is for 2024. Slovenia ranks 34, and it fell 5 places from 29th last year. Shock to me was, of course, Czechia, and you've just heard it before, it's on 104th place. So maybe I don't always agree with the indexes, but these are indicators where country is lagging behind, and if nothing else, you can at least try to move forward in the specific topics that the index cover. So I would say that compared to Czechia, we're doing well, but compared to our own expectations or maybe our own strategies, we still have plenty of place to improve. The first one would definitely be pay gap, because it's increasing. So we are actually quite grateful that the European Commission has managed to get through the Pay Transparency Directive. That's one of the steps in the right direction. I think we're also lacking the time per se. I think that women spend much more time in care work than men in Slovenia, and unpaid work and care as well. And I would also say that the emerging challenges, which are STEM and, of course, artificial intelligence and new economies, are somewhere or some place where girls in Slovenia are probably lagging behind, and this is also something that we should put our focus on. But overall, compared to Czechia, I have to be really grateful that I'm living in Slovenia. Thank you.
Yes, and hello everyone, I'm Christian, I come from Estonia, and maybe first things first, I use pronouns he and him if anybody is interested in this. I was also thinking that before I come to the actual question, I would like to tell something, that one of my first male role models was actually Czech. And I'm sure nowadays he would be maybe controversial figure, maybe. I haven't read this book for a very, very long time, but it was this robber called Rumcais that I really enjoyed as a child, and I really liked these cartoons that we had. But aside from Rumcais and coming to the state of gender equality in different countries in Europe, I think one of the things that is very important to really look at is these contextual factors that have made significant impact where we are with gender equality. And they're not necessarily about the gender equality policies themselves, but I think what we talk quite often is about these countries that were in the Soviet Union sphere of influence or were occupied by Soviet Union, and then what choices did they make in the 90s. So these have had long impacts, and I think we're still dealing with these impacts. And if I'm thinking about my own countries, I would like to focus or bring out 3 sort of contextual factors. One that we can't overlook, but what maybe explains a bit how we see gender equality and what's important for us is our geopolitical location. So we are surrounded north and west by the most gender equal countries in the world, Finland, Sweden. In east we have Russia, in south we have Latvia. So it's an interesting combination of different countries and different sort of influences also on our society as well. But what I can tell is in the 90s and early 2000s, definitely there was this drive to become more like Finland. So this was kind of seen as an ideal, and we wanted to go this path. Now it's less so, but it definitely made an impact. The other sort of big impact was to our childhood, sort of early childhood system. So we decided to keep the kindergartens. I know that in Czech Republic that has been a big debate that these were kind of abolished over time. But in Estonia, we actually did invest in these, and this was helpful. On the other side, we also have too generous parental leave scheme that is keeping women away from the labor market. So it's a paradoxical situation. And maybe the third part that I would like to bring out here is the very quick and extreme market liberation that we did in Estonia. So it was this belief on free market that was it's very unusual. Even if I look back on the articles that were written maybe a decade ago or 15 years ago, it really raises my eyebrows as well. And the result of this market liberalization, as I understand it, is also one of the highest pay gap throughout like decades in Europe. So I'm sure we beat Czech Republic, or have beaten Czech Republic in this for a very, very long time. So if I think of right now, I mentioned already gender pay gap that is problematic for us, also is problematic gender segregation, especially in higher education. I checked again, Czech Republic on this, it's very similar issues. So I think overall there are much more similarities than there are differences in between our societies. So I stop here for a moment.
Thank you, Josie.
Thank you. First of all, allow me to congratulate you for organizing this forum. I think it's crucial that we discuss these issues publicly and that we exchange, I wouldn't say best practices, I would say promising practices that can be adaptable to each country. My answer will be a combination of the previous two, because I think it's important that we understand Cyprus, that it's a quite new state since 1960. It had acceded the European Union in 2004. And geopolitically, we're just beneath Turkey, and we're a half-occupied country by Turkey since the invasion in 1974. I think it's important to mention this so that you also have an understanding of our culture. Now, if I take the indexes, I'm very fond of these reports because they give us the tools to be better. But what I don't like is that it creates this kind of competition between countries. And I think competition between countries on gender equality is not healthy. Gender equality is a huge problem all around the world. No country has succeeded in substantial gender equality. And I think it's important to learn from each other and see how we can adapt promising practices in order to succeed in gender equality. So if I take the indexes, EIGE ranks Cyprus 21st out of 27 countries. We do have the two biggest problems that we face is power and time. When it comes to power, this government has for the first time appointed a total of 37% of women ministers, and that's a first, and that's a step forward, and we still have a long way, of course, to go. We have 14% in parliament, and we are lacking when it comes to corporate and decision-making in private and public companies. Now, the World Economic Forum has upgraded us from 106 to 86th. I think it's a step forward. And I was reading recently the report of the UN on SDGs 2030, and Cyprus is ranked 39th there. And it says that there is a progress, and they see progress to be happening until 2030. But again, I underline, no country will manage to reach SDGs 2030. My first message, and I will stop here, is that we need to start seeing gender equality not as another problem to be solved, but as the solution to a lot of problems. And I will stop here until the next question.
Thank you so much, Josie. Maybe question to Monika. So we heard all different areas mentioned, from gender pay gap to gender-based violence. These are also areas European Commission worked very hard last term on. So how would you reflect the situation in Europe in general, in EU, but also on how would you reflect the successes of the European Commission? And maybe, if possible, I know that the European Commission, the new one, is not yet fully in power, but if you have hints or insights about the new areas or challenges they want to work on, we'll be happy to hear.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And first of all, congratulations. Congratulations to the governmental office for organizing this forum, because as far as I remember, and I'm not the youngest here, this is the first of its kind. The Forum on Equality between Men and Women, organized by the governmental office. This is a history. So once we will be referring to this moment. But now to your question. That's why I wanted to talk the last year, just to hear first from the member states. So what I used to say is that EU is a good address for women, but equality between men and women is yet the unfinished business. There were some indexes mention it, so the most relevant, I would say, is the index prepared by the European Institute for Gender Equality, where I had the chance to meet Christian years ago. And this IG index shows on the scale 0 to 100, I'm sure that you are all familiar with this, where we stand as Europe and various member states with equality in different areas. And there is still this wide space which needs to be filled. So we are not at all at 100 yet. And this is the unfinished business we have to work on. When it comes to the equality as a topic within the European Commission, long history. Josie, you've mentioned 2004 as an accession moment for Cyprus and also for another 9 countries. Me being Czech, I can confess here, but I don't know if it's true for the other countries who acceded, like Estonia and Slovenia, that without the accession to the EU, change would come much slower. So this was the historical moment for many member states now, that they had to provide this transposition of legislation and politics, including in the area of equality and non-discrimination, including the equality between men and women. And this was the biggest progress within years for these countries. Then it slowed down a little bit in these countries, and it had to be President von der Leyen, who came in 2019, and she was the one who called for the Union of Equality. This was one of her headlines for the new Commission. She didn't know that COVID will hit. She didn't know that Russia will occupy Ukraine. But still, she didn't back from this aim. She said, we are still here, the Union of Equality, we work on it. And she drafted several important legislations. I had a pleasure to work in the team there in Brussels as part of the cabinet of Vice President in charge of equality. So there were many important legislative files which has been drafted, adopted, finalized. Some of them are already in place, like the transparency in pay. There are some which still needs to come into the power, like violence against women or the equality bodies, but still we are there. So with regard to the future, the fact that Ursula von der Leyen has been nominated as a president of the next commission, it gives me a big hope. I will leave it here.
Thank you so much. So I will probably start digging more into your answers and start with Christian. You mentioned gender pay gap, so that's a form of discrimination on a labor market. You're a commissioner for gender equality. Could you maybe tell us more, what are your powers in this regard? So just to give you reference, we have a Czech commissioner for human rights, which is Klára Šimečková. You met her and saw her here today. She's a political, she's not politician per se, but she's politically appointed and cover all the areas, including gender equality. We have a strong equality body, which is an ombudsman, which is digging more into the complaints as such. So I was wondering, what is your role in comparison to how it is in Czechia?
Yes, so maybe if I could start before going into the details of the equality body itself, I wanted also to maybe share one of interesting practice. It's an interesting project that we have in Estonia right now with the to tackle the gender pay gap. So for the first time, we have made a digital tool for all the companies so that they can monitor the gender pay gap in their companies very easily. So they don't have to do themselves anything. All the data comes in through the registries, so meaning that all the pay data, everything, you as the head of the company, you just log into the regular labor market sort of office website, and you see anything related to the gender disparities in your company, which is, I think, for our country quite innovative. Unfortunately, it wasn't my office that did that. It was the Ministry of Economy and Communications. But nevertheless, I mean, it's a wonderful tool that should help the companies to reduce gender pay gap. If we talk about now about the institution, the equality body, then my institution is it's an independent body, meaning that we are supposed to be and we are free from any governmental interference. So they shouldn't be guiding us in any way, choosing our topics that we work on, and we are there to criticize the governmental actions as well, and that's the power I've used several times, but it also depends a little bit on the sort of capacities that we have, because there are some important policy initiatives, for example, such as Green Deal, that has a huge budgetary number, budgetary implication, and expects from people a lot. But when we started to dig in, how much do the governmental bodies, like different ministries responsible for the Green Deal, how much do they take the equality perspectives on board, we came to the conclusion that very, very, very little. So it's meant for people, its success depends on people, but at the same time, the government talks about it only in economic terms rather than anything else. So these are the powers that we have, and also the selection of my post, the commissioner's post, is free from political interference. It's done by the group of experts as well, and yeah, so I don't know, did that answer your question? Yeah.
Thank you for showing us the examples you work on. Maybe I would have one more general question for you. Could you maybe tell us more about the policy and legal framework for anti-discrimination in Estonia? When I was preparing for this panel, I also checked your LinkedIn, where you mentioned that there is a new bill proposed. So I was wondering how that will change everything and whether it's already adopted or not.
Yes, well, I'm sure several... It's not working? Maybe it takes a little bit of time. So indeed, this bill that you mentioned, I did post it on LinkedIn, and now where it is at the moment, maybe some people would prefer that I hadn't posted it. But I will explain that a little bit later. But indeed, so we have two main acts regarding equality, the two acts that are kind of governing acts for Commissioner's Office that we work with. One is the Gender Equality Act, and the other one is Equal Treatment Act. the Gender Equality Act, as the name says, is there to prevent the discrimination based on people's gender, family obligations, anything related to gender, really. So we interpret it in a very, very broad manner. And it has a very wide scope as well in terms of protections, whereas Equal Treatment Act, unfortunately, Estonia took the bare minimum from the European Commission requirements. And so we cover these grounds such as race, nationality, age, sexual orientation, but it's limited in their scope as well. And anyone who is suspecting that they've been treated unfairly based on any of these reasons, they can turn to us, and we analyze the situation. We give the opinion, which could be then submitted also to the court as an extra evidence. But now coming to that bill that is still there to merge the two different acts. One of the ideas that behind it was also that by this merger we solve these problems that are with the two different acts, meaning that, for example, right now our Equal Treatment Act doesn't cover, when we talk about sexual orientation, it doesn't cover services. So the new act would see that all these different grounds would have very wide protection. It also introduces new grounds such as social status as well, which is new for Estonia. And finally, it takes into account already the directives on the minimum standards of equality bodies. And with these texts that they would be compliant already.
Thank you, Christian. Now I move to Josie. You're a commissioner as well. Could you maybe tell us more about your competencies? How is this role equipped in Cyprus?
Yes, thank you. Our role differs from our colleague here. We're trying something new now in Cyprus. The Office of the Commissioner for Gender Equality was created in 2014, and it had an advisory role to the president. Yeah, here I will make a parenthesis and go a step back, and I would like, in 2 words, just to say that I'm coming from civil society. I used to work for NGOs, the European Women's Lobby, apart from the Cyprus Women's Lobby, and also as an expert to the European Commission and the Council of Europe when it comes to issues of trafficking in women. I'm saying this because I wanted to explain that seeing how the Office of the Commissioner was working from the outside and evaluating it, we saw that what we were lacking in Cyprus was coordination. So in that effect, with this government, what we're trying to do is now we have upgraded the Commissioner for Gender Equality. So in 2014, it was appointed by the President. I was appointed by the President in 2023, but we have drafted a legislation so that we have established the Commissioner for Gender Equality, as now is by law, and no President can decide to remove it or not. So it's there. What's their role? What's the role of the office? Our role is to work preventatively. Yeah, and to work preventatively, we're trying something new. So we're working with all ministries and deputy ministries, and we're trying to mainstream gender horizontally in all policies. We're not focusing on the Ministry of Labor, for example, or the Ministry of Education, which are the 2 most crucial, if you like, and social welfare when it comes to gender equality and domestic violence. So, and violence against women, I apologize. So what we are trying to do now is to shift the culture. I think our colleague before was talking about culture. We're trying to shift the culture within the government so that we start lead by example to the whole of society. But the way we are working now is that our office is responsible in drafting and coordinating the national strategy for gender equality in collaboration with all ministries and deputy ministries. And in order to succeed in this, all ministries and deputy ministries have appointed a gender focal point within their ministries. So with them, we decide those policies and actions that each ministry should take on in order to promote gender equality. However, because I'm coming from civil society, I know how important it is to listen to civil society, to listen to the ground. So you have the top-down approach where we try to lead as an example, but when we drafted the National Strategy 2024-2026, we had a huge public consultation with civil society actors, women's organizations, women's political wings, employers' organizations, trade unions. We all sat down, 200 people in a room for a day. We separated into thematic priorities, for example, women in shipping, maritime, women in STEM, gender and labor, gender budgeting. For the first time now, the European Commission is helping us to create this tool of gender budgeting, state budgeting, which is crucial, I think, to implement a lot of policies. So with the civil society, we wanted civil society to feel ownership of policies that are coming out from the government for them. Yeah. So we tried to create all these synergies with employers, with private companies, trade unions, and women, of course, in order to have a document for them to implement those policies. And equally important is that the commissioner, this time me, I'm also the president of the National Machinery for Women's Rights, which is an advisory body to the government through the commissioner to implement other policies and actions. And we have specific funding for NGOs, for civil society, that they can apply and implement projects that are aligned with the strategy that they also drafted. So I think it's important. I think one of the most important tools to achieve, to accelerate the process towards gender equality is the creation of synergies and make everyone understand that gender equality, again, is part of the solution, and they can all assist towards that direction. So this is our role when it comes to gender equality, to work preventatively and create those policies that create a culture of gender equality, if I may say, because I totally agree with the colleague before he was talking, I think it's you, that you mentioned that we live in societies where we value power and we don't value care. And I think in one world, this is what we call patriarchy. And if I need to mention one of the biggest barriers that we face is this, the system of patriarchy. And when I say patriarchy, I don't mean men, I mean a system that was created through history. And this is how it is connected exactly with violence against women and gender-based violence. And this is how we view it at the moment, at least, is that violence against women should be connected with gender equality strategies. So we need to work holistically, yes, to create that environment that women can also feel safe to report when it comes to violence against women. So I'll stop here, and if you have any other questions, please.
Sure. So there were so many points I wrote, and I always check the time because we have not that much. Otherwise, I would open a lot. But maybe my reflection, I really like how you mentioned that the synergies needs to be built. I think there are many people from NGO sector who would agree and who we cooperate with, and we're delighted to do so. I think NGOs for sure are important in all areas, especially in the area of also gender-based violence, because here in Czechia we are relying on their services to the survivors funded by the state. Definitely institutional setting is important. I'm very excited to hear the new amendments which allowed your position to be established by law, something we do not have at the moment, but we are always looking for and hope that one day we will. You mentioned at the end the gender-based violence. So maybe could you tell us more? And you also mentioned that you're drafting a new strategy. We are also currently reviewing and updating ours. Hopefully in the next weeks it will be adopted by the government. I was wondering, what is your role in gender-based prevention? And maybe if you could tell us more about the strategy or also about the law you have. I know that when I was preparing that you have a special law on prevention and combating violence, something we do not have. We have different laws covering it. We have a special law for victims' rights. Yeah, I was wondering if you could reflect on that.
Sure. I will see my notes here. Is it working? Yeah. So Cyprus has ratified the Istanbul Convention, the Convention on Violence Against Women of the Council of Europe in 2017. But I think it's important also here to say that I don't know if it's here in Czech Republic whether there is a strong feminist movement or women's movement, because that played a huge role in Cyprus for us to succeed in the ratification of the convention. So we've started talking about male violence against women in 2007. And politicians were like, why male violence against women? They couldn't understand, they couldn't make the connections. So we really pushed a lot back then as civil society, as a women's lobby, to explain and start having the discussion in public what we mean by male violence against women. So then it came in 2017. In 2016, we ratified the convention. In 2017, in 2017 we did. And in 2021, we finally had the legislation, which is in line. It is exactly as it is the convention. We focus a lot on prevention, on protection and prosecution, and awareness raising. So I think one of the, I would say, promising practices when it comes to this is the setting of the National Coordinating Body to prevent and combat violence against women, which also includes all stakeholders, government stakeholders, and civil society. So together, again, with civil society, we monitor and coordinate all these policies. We have also created the so-called, translated in English would be Women's House, which is a one-stop shop, I would say, which is mostly commonly used, one-stop shop for women, for all forms of violence against women, be it financial, be it domestic, be it physical, psychological. So it is a place, it is an interdepartmental place where all women facing any form of violence can go there, and they can receive different kind of services, legal advice, psychological support, and then they can be referred to the shelter. A shelter, of course, which is run by NGOs, one NGO, with state funding since the 80s. Actually, this is the story. Another, I think, important, what we have added above the convention is criminalizing femicides. We had a huge discussion in Cyprus talking about femicides. There was, and we decided to name the problem as it is. It's killing of women because they're women, and we have included the definition in the legislation. We haven't had yet any criminalizing based on that. I think there was only one femicide since, but it's still an ongoing process. We will see how this will proceed. So it is an ongoing process. I don't want to make this sound that we have the perfect scenario when it comes to violence against women. We are in the process now training first-line officers, including health officers, to be in position to identify a possible victim if she wishes to go to the hospital. You know, sometimes we hear, women saying that they fell off the stairs and they are not saying the story. So we're training first-line officers to be in position to identify possible victims. And we are also in continuously training police officers. We still have stereotypical ideas when it comes to women, again, from police officers. So it's an ongoing process. We have come a long way. The numbers, as we know, is that 1 in 4 in Cyprus are victims of violence. But we are, in a population less than 1 million, so it's a huge problem. The good news, which are not, but I would say good news, is that what we see is that there are more reports from women, which is good news, if you like, because it means that they are finding their voice. It means that the system is starting to work to protect them. So we see more reporting by women, which is good. So they're slowly but steadily breaking their silence, but we need to have in place stronger, if you like, institutions to assist them and be free of any forms of violence.
Thank you so much, Josie. It was very interesting hearing about the criminalization of femicide. That's something we do not have at the moment. Women's houses, that was also very interesting. So it's a state kind of institution. From this, yeah, so this is something we do not have as well. What I wanted to react to was also the Istanbul Convention. So good that you mentioned we tried to get a permission to ratify by Senate. Unfortunately, by 2 votes short, it has not been passed. But we still hope that after the election it will. I have a question for Monika. So we mentioned Istanbul Convention. There is also the Gender-Based Violence Directive, which you already mentioned. Some people do not see the reason why the directive needed to be adopted if we have convention. There are countries like Czechia, again, which do not have, which did not ratify the convention, but maybe you could work and tell us maybe more, elaborate more on why do we need to have such a directive and how do they cooperate with the Istanbul Convention?
The directive is hardcore EU legislation and it's binding for member states. And there is still 5 member states in the EU which hesitate to ratify the Istanbul Convention. The directive has been adopted in the atmosphere of after Me Too and also in the atmosphere of having new forms of violence which are not reflected in the Istanbul Convention. It was a perfect tool for its time. It has been negotiated by the members of the Council of Europe, the member states, in the first decade of the 21st century. But the world shifted. And there are new forms of violence and also new responses to violence, which are now reflected in the directive. And the directive, as I've mentioned, is binding for member states. So those who didn't ratify the Istanbul Convention, which in my view, but it's my personal view, please don't quote it, it's a view of the European Commission, has now the symbolic value. And the fact that there are still member states which are in conflict with the values of the Istanbul Convention, I think it also has some important relevance for discussion. There is a big space for myth and big volume of disinformation and manipulation around the Istanbul Convention. And it was clear that in Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Lithuania, that the Istanbul Convention will never be ratified. So the directive has its place in the system, in the legislative framework. It still needs to be transposed in the national legislation. And I urge everybody who is here in the room, who is active in the area of violence against women, to be part of the process, because the quality of the transposition of the directive will also mean the quality of protection of victims of violence against women, domestic violence, and also the prevention of violence against women. So it's all covered in the directive, which is a little bit my baby. So I admit that I will never speak against that. But I also wanted to reflect on something what Josie said at the beginning, because I see some familiar faces from the Czech civil society, because Josie mentioned that it has been established as an advisory body to the presidential office. And I think that it might be also incentive for the Czech NGOs to push the presidential office to have an advisory body for gender equality. It doesn't exist, and there is this famous picture of a Czech president who established its advisory body for international policy, and we have so many experts on the international policy like Mila sitting here, and hence there are 7 men represented in the body. So speaking about the power, we are not there yet in some member states, including the Czech Republic. But you wanted to give me a question? Yeah, the directive. Okay, I answered.
Sure, Josie, you can go.
I have a question. Yes, I have a question on the directive, and it's with regard to the definition of rape and the consent. What went wrong there?
The willingness of member states to accept that there has been a holistic definition, detailed definition, and we ended up without that, yeah. But it was there in the draft, you recall. Yeah.
I know, but we're going to work on it, all of us.
Thank you so much. So as I mentioned, so it was part of the directive, but unfortunately in the end, it has not been adopted in that way. I just checked the time. So maybe we can go to another area, and that's gender balance representation. So the former commission under its president, Ursula von der Leyen, achieved parity, or 13 against 12 female, 13 male, 12 female members. Currently, we still do not have, well, the country is nominated, its representatives. It seems that the parity will not rather be achieved. I also read that might endanger the existence of the Commissioner for Equality, who was already in the past commission. So this is one of the questions. Maybe I will make it controversial. Will there be a Commissioner for Equality? And will this have any effect on priorities of the next commission regarding gender equality?
So it's an interesting question, of course. So 2 parts. First is the gender balance within the College of Commissioners of the next commission. I believe that we will get there with at least 11 female commissioners, and this is already a success. Even though I was hoping that today's announcement of the French commissioner will mean that we have 1 female plus, but no, it will be Stéphane Séjourné, so 11. But when it comes to the equality agenda within the next commission, I've already mentioned in my first intervention that the fact that it is Ursula von der Leyen herself who is the president and who will hopefully remain a president after the vote in the European Parliament later in autumn gives me hope, because her personal engagement, and this is, I think, what matters. I don't know what's your experience, but usually when you have individuals who are personally engaged and active in the area and mobilize the others, then it works. I remember when there was a commission run by Jean-Claude Juncker, there was already a first time equality portfolio mentioned in the title of the commissioner. It was then the Commissioner for Justice, Consumers and Equality. And because I was working for that commissioner, I always introduced her like a commissioner for equality, justice and consumers. It's all about words. But the next commission, represented by Ursula von der Leyen and Commissioner Helena Dalli, had a commissioner only for equality. For the next commission, I think that we will still have commissioner for equality and something. It will be either intergenerational dialogue or something else. I'm not sure that in the current geopolitical situation, there is enough spaces in the college that equality can be represented just by one commissioner. But nevertheless, having an experience within the body, within the European Commission, it's no harm for the portfolio. The important thing is that the leadership of the Commission will stand behind fully. And this with Ursula and other representatives of member states who are nominated as a commissioners, I'm sure that it will work and the Union of Quality can continue progressing.
Thank you so much. So we remain hopeful. And now I finally move to Helena. So we opened the topic of gender balance decision making, and in Slovenia you have obligatory gender quota mechanism. So you mentioned that Czechia, according to EGA Gender Equality Index, unfortunately dropped to the first worst. One of the reasons why we score so badly is that we do not have sufficient scores which influence the power portfolio. So my question is, maybe could you introduce us not only what the gender quotas are, like how they are structured, which elections do they influence, but also what was the process of their adoption? Because unfortunately here, whenever we open this topic, there is a big backlash by many also female politicians. So I would be delighted to hear your experience.
You hear me? Okay, perfect. Okay, so first of all, we have 3 different legislations that have quotas in the voting systems. The first one was issued in 2004, and it's for EU elections. And the rule is that 40% of the underrepresented sex has to be present at the list, and at least one of the opposite sexes have to be in the first half of because there is so few candidates. So that means that at least one male and female have to be in the top 2 positions in the list for EU elections. The result was ever since everyone was adhering to these gender quotas. Right now we have 9 parliamentarians from Slovenia, 6 are male and 3 are female. What is really, I won't say strange, but they were all elected by preference vote, even though, of course, the political parties were nominating them. And then the biggest shift was the legislation issued in 2005 and 2006. Local elections were, the law was issued in 2005, and in 2006 it was the National Assembly Elections Act. I would like to point out that, and maybe this is I would say the light at the end of the tunnel, the government that passed these 2 laws was right-wing government led by Janez Janša. So the question behind it is, of course, was this a feminist breakthrough in the right-wing political ideology, or was it strategic legislation? I think, I mean, because I don't know what was the reasoning behind, because of course everything was then made in Vox Populi, and I will also tell you what were the pros and contras. But here you will not find the strategic decision. I think it was strategic because we don't have a 2 political party system, but we have a multi-party system, and we have a continuous emergence of new parties, new names, new faces. And this, of course, the established parties are then, they have to fight to keep their voters. But when you are like the party of Janez Janša, which is a socialist democratic party, they're in place for a very, very long time. So they know their constituencies, they know where the voters reside, they know what are their preferences. And for them, the gender quotas are not a problem, because they know how to make a list of candidates so that the right ones are elected in the constituencies where they usually get the majority of votes. So the national elections into the National Assembly have quotas, and that's 35% of the underrepresented sex has to be present at the list, and that's it. So you have to adhere to this. Local elections are a bit more specific and also maybe a good example for Czech if you cannot break through with this 35%. So the local elections are a story on its own. We have quotas that were gradually introduced. In 2006, 20% of the underrepresented sex had to be in the list of candidates. In 2010, it had to be 30%. In 2014, 40%. For the first two, so 2006 and 2010, every third candidate of the opposite sex had to be on the list. And in 2014, we introduced a so-called zipper system, which means that when you have a list of candidates, one is male, female, male, female, male, female. And this actually brought the best results. So I would say that if I go through numbers, but I'm sorry, I'm going to go through numbers, you have to hear it, but it's going to be just statistics. So first of all, bear in mind that the elections are run by political parties in Slovenia. It's very hard to succeed as an independent candidate. You have to have a list, you have to be present in constituencies. We have 8 of them. And once you start running, it's the political party that does the candidate process, and they nominate the delegates. So you have to be in the political party, and of course the political party has to be very democratic or pro-feminist in a way to say, okay, my agenda is also to include women in the political process. And I think it's not, the political, or let's say the Vox Populi debate was more or less the same as here in Czechia, whereas no one is talking about the structural barriers that women face when they want to enter into the politics. It's not it's not true that we are not a political people. We are also interested in environment, in politics, in daycare, in healthcare, in where our money is going, in taxes. Don't think we're stupid. We're not. But when you're trying to get into the political party and get to top of the candidate lists, you are facing all the misogyny and all the stereotypes that were represented before by one of your politicians. So, well, that's the way it is. But I would say that, don't underestimate us. Don't put us into the corner just because we are women. And when you were talking about, before I was listening and someone was saying, yeah, but women, you don't have time. Plus, you have to be active in politics. And of course, if you're spending hours and hours and hours debating, there is a solution. You can limit the debate time to 3 minutes. And everyone will be participating, you always have a solution. Once you know what the problem is, So I would say the debates, I have to read you some pros and cons because I think you're hearing the same. So the pro was that, first of all, the quotas guarantee that political parties will have to nominate female representatives as well. The quotas also compensate the existing inequalities, and now I will go into the existing inequalities because in Slovenia, in the local elections, usually it was, the ratio of nominated females and then elected was, for instance, in 2002, this is before the legislation, there was 21% of nominated candidates and 23 were elected. In 2006, the number goes up, oh wonder. There was 32% that was nominated and 21% that was elected. So that was an 8.1 increase. And then in 2010, it was 38% because we already had quotas that had to go up. 38% that was nominated and 22% that was elected. And they were not elected because the zipper system was not in place yet. So the political parties, being smart as they are, they would put male candidates on top of the list. And then 2014 is the first realistic outcome of the quotas, which means 45% of candidates were female and that they were candidates, and then 31% were elected. And the zipper system actually allows women, because women want to be active, they want to be present in politics, specifically in local level. But if you don't give them the chance, and if the political parties are the ones who are telling you, I like you, I don't like you, I like you, I don't like you, then of course I like men more than I like women. Because they, first of all, historically they were always in power. And second of all, you feel more comfortable with the same. And women, yeah, maybe we're different. I don't know. I wouldn't say that our brain is different, but maybe we just feel more connected to different issues. But that's not wrong, you know? That's never wrong to hear more opinions. It's never wrong to have more voices heard. It's never wrong to have more people that want to be active in political sphere. So now, contrast. I have to go back to that. So the contra was that, of course, the quotas are negative discrimination against men because they're positive for women but negative for men. And then they're not democratic. Why would you have quotas? Because this is not a democratic process. And of course, women don't want to be elected. They don't want to participate in public sphere. And then it was women and men in Slovenia are already equal in front of the law. So we have equal position in society. So why would you need to go into the political sphere? I think you're hearing the same arguments here. And I would say that if nothing else, just address every single issue. And then, of course, go think about the mathematics behind the election. Because political parties know exactly what the mathematics is. So, you know, go into the mathematics, see how the system works, and then try to address it there. And then you have then of course you have to have legislation. I think you cannot avoid quotas when you have such a low percentage of women. And you know that the reason why they're so low is also the political party system. So, you know, address the issue where it exists, not in the stereotypes. Of course they exist, but let women participate, let them get in front, and let have role models. Once you have role models, no one will be afraid of them anymore. That's it.
Thank you so much, Helena. And before I will have my reflection or pose any more questions as the final one, I will give floor to you. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Okay, I do not really see any. Okay.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you for your questions. So we have specific funding to implement the strategy for gender equality 2024-2026, 3 year. And for that, I don't have the exact numbers with me right now, but it's a bit more than $1 million for its implementation from the government part, together with the projects that we receive from the European Commission, for example, to create more structures and infrastructures for childcare and the elderly. When it comes to the strategy on domestic violence, again, I have it in my bag, if I'm not mistaken, but it's more than 300,000 euros for the implementation of the strategy on domestic violence. And when it comes to the funding for the national machinery for women's rights, it's we will increase it now after our recommendation to the government from 250,000 to 350,000, and out of this, to the members of to the board of the National Machinery for Women's Rights, we give them an annual budget for their own running costs, up to 17,000 euros. And for the members, which is another list, not the board, the council, if you like, of the national machinery, 10,000 euros for their running costs. And the rest of the budget is to implement projects. And actually, what we are trying to do, another exercise we're doing now, is I have asked all ministries and deputy ministries to inform our office of how much money they spend to direct or indirect policies and actions related to gender equality. And for this, we're going to have a better idea of how we're spending the money, because once we have a better idea of how we spend the money, then we can draft more specific and targeted policies and actions. I hope I answer your question. I know it's not enough, but it's there, and we're trying to make the most out of it.
Thank you so much for the question and for Josie to answer. Is there any other? If not so, thank you so much again. It was very interesting and it was a big pleasure to have you. Please thank you again to Monika Ladmanová, Helena Valas, Veske and Josie Christodoulou. Thank you so much. And just